Welcome to the Girls and Ghosts podcast. I'm Shauna.
And I'm Lexie.
And on today's episode, we are going to be discussing the Conjuring House.
Very exciting. This has been on our list of film for quite a while, but we're finally here doing it. So
I'm so excited because there's a lot that goes into the Conjuring House. It is very, very well known, and there has been like a lot of like drama to it recently.
Yeah, this is probably going to be a long episode.
Yeah. But let's stop rambling and let's just go on into the discussion. What appears to be a peaceful farmhouse on the outside harbours a dark secret that goes beyond the alleged hauntings it's become infamous for. Following the release of the film The Conjuring, the actual Conjuring House has become a legend in not only the cinematic world of horror, but amongst paranormal investigators known for their explorations of America's most haunted locations. But is it? Are the stories that helped amplify the Warrens' time in the otherworldly spotlight true? Or were the Warrens pulling the ghostly veil over everyone's eyes? Over the years, more and more evidence has been brought to light, exposing everything from inconsistencies in stories to bold-faced lies and exaggerations. The revelations had a domino effect, unraveling the claims in some of the Warrens' most notable and known paranormal cases, though none as controversial as the stories of the Conjuring House. From launching one of the largest horror franchises in Hollywood to becoming known as one of the Warrens' biggest schemes, dive into a true story of the Conjuring, exploring the story's meteoric rise in pop culture and recent disgraced downfall.
My nail just popped up. Is this a paranormal experience?
Oh my goodness.
I'm kidding. The Conjuring House origins. In 2013, audiences were introduced to one of the scariest films in horror cinema's history, getting an extra shot of terror courtesy of claims it was based on true events, though exaggerated for theatrical release. The Conjuring movie closely followed the claims of the Perron family, the subjects the film is based on. But before it was thrust into the limelight, the home was a simple farmhouse in the countryside of Harrisville, or was originally known as the Arnold Estate. Built in 1736, the estate exchanged hands multiple times before becoming the Perron family residence. Interestingly, their arrival would spark with the alleged hauntings that shot them to ghostly notoriety.
The Perrons meet the Warrens. Caroline and Roger Perron lived in the home with their 5 daughters during the 1970s, but their time in the house was memorable for all the wrong reasons, so they said. Almost immediately after moving in, the alleged occurrences began. One of the first reports came from Caroline herself. Her initial claims were seemingly harmless, with items disappearing and piles of dirt in a freshly cleaned kitchen. However, according to the family, the terror escalated quickly, reporting unexplained shadows, disembodied footsteps, doors opening on their own. Caroline would eventually conduct her own research on the property, trying to uncover the cause of the unexplained activity that was now tormenting the family. Eventually, she would come to her own conclusions, and a combination of her claims and research would lead her to a couple known for their work with just such experiences. Believing the activity had increased in severity and had since become malevolent, the Perron family decided to seek out the help of renowned paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. Their entrance into the case would make it both famous and infamous.
Controversy of the Conjuring House. Today, the Conjuring franchise is one of Hollywood's most successful horror movies franchise. However, as its popularity has grown, so have claims that the Warrens were not renowned paranormal investigators they claimed to be. In fact, many now believe the duo was con artists. They were exploiting those who came to them for help with what they believed to be poltergeist activity. The story of the Conjuring House is one that has since been shrouded in controversy. More accurate and detailed accounts of what truly happened at this infamous home have been discovered. First, an examination of the parents' claims.
What really happened at the Conjuring House? The Conjuring film is inspired by the accounts of the Perron family, retold by Andrea Perron, the oldest daughter, in her trilogy of books House of Darkness, House of Light. However, it's important to know that Andrea's books are largely based on her mother Caroline's research. This includes talking to locals and validating their accounts via psychics. Caroline believed that at least a dozen mysterious deaths occurred on the property. She claimed that a female demon was responsible for the deaths and even influenced the spirits' malevolent behavior. In an interview, she noted, "Whoever the spirits was, she perceived herself to be the mistress of their house, and she resented the competition my mother posed for that position." Within a few months of experiencing the alleged activity, Caroline began reaching out to paranormal investigators, ultimately receiving various results. One group claimed to have witnessed the phenomena experienced by the parents. They even claimed to have communicated with some of the spirits on the property. This includes a child and what they believe to be an older woman with a demented spirit. However, these claims were disputed by skeptics, with some researchers claiming they found no evidence of a haunting, but the parents persisted, and this is when Ed and Lorraine Warren entered what would become the Conjuring saga.
The truth about the Warrens. Ed and Lorraine Warren are among the most famous and infamous paranormal investigators in history. On screen, their story plays out like a Hollywood fairy tale, but by various accounts, that's where the fairy tale ends, as the reality is far from their cinematic portrayal. Ed Warren was a self-taught, self-professed demonologist, author, and lecturer. Lorraine claims include being clairvoyant and a light trance medium. Their work with the parents came just off the heels of their highly publicized case involving a Raggedy Ann doll allegedly possessed by demonic spirits. You know who. Ed and Lorraine reportedly made several trips to the home to investigate. Their supposed findings include the misty figure of a woman seen by a member of their investigation team and various other unexplained phenomena. Lorraine would go on to conduct a seance, portrayed as an exorcism led by Ed in the film. Caroline allegedly became possessed by Bathsheba, the demonic force that Caroline had decided was tormenting the home. Though Andrea claimed to have secretly witnessed the event, Roger Perron, Caroline's husband, is said not to have shared the same beliefs as Caroline and the Warrens, ultimately putting an end to the seance.
Debunking the occult. The Warrens were no strangers to these types of practices they performed in order to lend credibility to their accounts, but well-respected skeptics did not buy into their antics, debunking the bulk of their work as exaggerated or exploitive. The Amityville Horror was one such case where it was found the accounts were intentionally fabricated for profit and fame. It wasn't the only infamous case that would eventually be exposed. In 2023, Netflix released a documentary titled The Devil on Trial, which centered on the fourth film in the franchise The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. In it, the Warrens were depicted as swindlers who preyed on vulnerable families. They combined extraordinary tales with pseudoscience to create the narratives used to sell their stories. Netflix wasn't the only media source to burst the Conjuring's bubble. Vox conducted its own investigation, going on describing the Warrens as a pair of conniving, reality-distorting, shamelessly granitized self-promoters and sham psychics running a long-term con job. However, it wasn't just the living that was the subjects of Warren's audacious claims.
The real Bathsheba. Caroline's research brought her to a woman named Bathsheba Sherman, who, according to local law, had a dark reputation. Allegedly, Bathsheba is said to have killed an infant, potentially her own, with a knitting needle. She was later acquitted due to lack of evidence. Additionally, claims include brutally against farmhands as well as the drowning of one of her children. It all ended with Bathsheba supposedly hung herself in the attic of her home. Local law painted her as a witch who practiced dark magic and worshipped the devil. The historical information available offers an alternate, more accurate depiction. Bathsheba Sherman was a real individual who lived in 19th century Rhode Island. However, according to the Burrillville Gazette, Gazette, she actually died at the age of 73 following a sudden paralysis, common known back then as a stroke. As for her children, information for only one, her son, Herbert L. Sherman, could be found via government census records, showing that he lived a long life as a farmer. According to Andrea's book, Caroline Perron claimed to have received much of her information about Bathsheba from a local historian named Mr. McKeer-Chernin. To date, however, researchers have yet to find any evidence of a case or trial involving Bathsheba, much less the existence of a local historian named McKeer-Chernin.
She never lived in the infamous house. What was discovered was that Bathsheba was a lifelong member of the local Baptist church. Her minister oversaw her funeral. Two highly unlikely events had been a devil-worshipping witch, as Caroline claimed. Perhaps the most exploratory evidence was that Bathsheba never lived at the Perron farmhouse. She resided on the Sherman farm, which was quite a ways away. By all accounts, Bathsheba was an ordinary, hard-working citizen. It was Andrea Perron and the Warrens that pushed the false, gruesome legacy that made Bathsheba a ghostly villain in The Conjuring, making her yet another victim.
Unraveling the Warrens' claims. With mounting evidence that disputes the validity of the Warrens' claims, it's hard to determine if the Perron family home was ever truly haunted. Jim Nicol, a respected skeptic and researcher, took an extensive look into the events claimed by the Perrons and Warrens and came to the following conclusion in his 2016 article for the Skeptical Inquirer. In it, he states, "I analyzed the Perrons' claims of demonic activity and showed that they were consistent with the effects of strong winds, misperceptions, schoolgirl pranks, vivid dreams, simple suggestion, role-playing, and other factors, including one child had a imaginary playdate, and the effects of memory after some 30 to 40 years." Further, Nichols picked apart selected passages from the Perrons' books providing explanations for the phenomena they claimed to have experienced, and his discoveries went beyond the paranormal. Nichols uncovered a dysfunctional dynamic within the Perron family, finding that Roger and Caroline were on the verge of a separation that eventually ended in divorce. In the case of the hauntings, the family was divided, with Roger dubbing the Warrens as a pair of two charlatans, and Caroline and her daughters standing in solidarity with the famed paranormal investigators.
No evidence is found for the reported deaths. Then there was the death Caroline claimed to have occurred on the property. Aside from Bathsheba's incorrectly attributed death, Nichols could find no evidence or record of the alleged murdered infant. His investigation also included talking to the former owners, Jerry and Norma Sutcliffe, who lived on the property from 1987 to 2019. The only issues they experienced were with the living, as the release of the Conjuring film prompted trespassers and vandals to frequent the home. It should be noted that in 2019, a couple who purchased the house for $439,000 claimed to have experienced all manner of demonic activity. However, some speculate that they may have capitalized on the popularity of the film, as they went on to sell the home in 2022 for $1.5 million to Boston developer Jacqueline Nunez. According to reports by the Boston Globe and various interviewers, the house doesn't allow people to live there year-round because the energy is so powerful.
Hoax or real haunting? Whether the stories of the Conjuring House are real depends on who you ask, as both sides offer their own evidence and beliefs. Some believe that the film exacerbated people's personal beliefs and their various psychological conditions, while others have provided theories on how the tales of the Conjuring home came about, as well as why the Conjuring may be too good to be true.
Important facts to consider. The hauntings were either exaggerated or fabricated by the Perron family for finance gain. Of course, the events captured in the film were heightened for theatrical effects, with paranormal enthusiasts pointing out that the film adds a demonic possession subplot that was not a part of the original story. But what was the true extent of the alleged activity the Perron family experienced? Could they have taken a few strange occurrences and turned them into a horror story for the ages, with Hollywood adding the final touches? The Perrons had denied Conjuring this story for profit, but Andrea certainly made a sizable amount of money from her books. Andrea Perron's books had no publisher's standing, which could be a sign her story lacks evidence. It is not uncommon for publishers to use extreme caution when working with non-fiction manuscripts so as to avoid legal ramifications. There are some that will take out multi-million-dollar insurance policies in the event a book is subjected to lawsuit based on libel or defamation. It's a bit suspicious that Andrea was unable to secure publishing for her books, reinforcing the theory that their story is based on tall tales and the Warrens' need for notoriety. Speaking of the Warrens, their involvement does not help the Perrons' cause. Though their involvement is what propelled the story to what it became, the exposure of the Warrens and their practices has since tarnished their reputation, making many believe that the Perron case is another one of their cons.
Logical explanations. There are logical explanations for the alleged activity the parents experienced in the home. Over the years, several investigators have offered their take on what occurred in the home, suggesting that the experiences were the result of everyday mishaps such as natural gas leaks, carbon monoxide poisoning, and other environmental factors. Some have found evidence of a bit of pranking on the part of the daughters. The power of suggestion and people ripe for believing the unbelievable is what truly heightened the Conjuring craze. Around the time period of the Perron family case, the film The Exodus had become a cultural phenomenon, coming just off the heels of Rosemary's Baby. Both films had a decent amount of controversy attached to them, as they led to the moral outrage and media frenzy and an uptick in registered hauntings and demonic possessions. Soon America began to lean into baseless conspiracies, stories of alien abductions, and what would later be dubbed satanic panic. People became open to paranormal suggestions, and reports of unexplained occurrences would grow into what it has become today.
The lasting legacy of The Conjuring. Though the evidence continues to mount against the validity of the Conjuring House hauntings, many still believe the stories perpetrated by the Warrens' estate and ghost hunters who conducted investigations at the home. It's not surprising, though, as many continue to believe the Amityville horror is true, even though extensive investigations and numerous legal disputes have proven otherwise. Regardless of what people believe, the fact is that the evidence in the Conjuring case remains problematic. The false accusations against Bathsheba has seemingly stuck, and the inconsistencies in Andrea Perron's books have not stopped them from selling, much less spawning a hit film. It also hasn't stopped the Warren name from becoming synonymous with the paranormal. Perhaps it's not that believers have yet to explore the evidence against the parents and Warner's claims. Maybe people simply want to believe that the seemingly impossible is possible. However, it's worth looking at both sides of the evidence presented. The parents have maintained their story, and though Lorraine claimed that the demons in the home were dangerous, it should be noted that the parents continued to live in the home for 9 years after the events.
Haunted New England. Now that you've explored the history of the Conjuring House, from reports of demonic possession to allegations of falsified claims, it's easy to see why the home is as legendary as it is controversial. The Conjuring House became a hotspot for paranormal investigators, simultaneously becoming a site for skeptics to denounce. The film and its predecessors have sparked curiosity around the nation, but there's so much more to uncover than what Hollywood has let on.
Okay, so we have just looked up some of the spirits that are supposedly haunting the Conjuring House. So we have Bathsheba Sherman, who we read about in what we've just read. The most infamous spirit associated with the home in life, she was a 19th century woman accused of witchcraft. In the paranormal lore, she is blamed for the most aggressive, violent activity and was believed to have targeted the mother of the family.
Manny, a friendly spirit whom the Perron children claimed to have communicated with, he would often appear in the nursery smiling at the other children.
That sounds creepy. And then apparently there's just other entities. The family and the investigators reported various other spirits, including a weeping woman, and multiple entities linked to the tragic history of the property, which includes reported drowning, a hanging, and other mysterious deaths. So there isn't like many specific names of who's haunting it by the seams of it. Ongoing activity. Okay, so these are the modern day stuff that are apparently happening. Ongoing activity. Caretakers and modern ghost hunters frequently report unexplained shadows, disembodied footsteps, strange odors, and items moving on their own. Investigations. The house remains a popular location for paranormal enthusiasts. However, skeptics note that many of the events could be tied to natural causes like environmental factors or the natural settling of a house that dates back to 1736. Oh my goodness, I didn't realize it went back that far. So all the like noises and stuff could just be like a settling house. But if I'm being completely honest, the one thing I've learnt today is I didn't realize that there was so much skeptic behind the Conjuring House, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like I always hear about people's experiences and what they've experienced haunting wise, and obviously the background of the Conjuring House, but I didn't realise that most people just don't believe it, or there's some people that have just been like, you know what, there's generally nothing there, and we was looking at a Reddit thread, and someone down here put like a lot of information and said, so yeah, no ghosts here, possibly some mental health issues, but I'm not a psychiatrist and haven't met any of the parents. So some people think it could just be like something that happened, well, something that didn't happen, but it was like the person had mental health issues. And then there's obviously the thing where they assume they made it up for money, which could also be a very high possibility, because obviously if you see money coming in and it becoming famous and you're gaining a lot from it, and then obviously most people, I'm not gonna lie, most people would probably just keep it going to make that money. The current owner is charging for tours and not at all fed up since they only bought the house to try to make money off gullible people. The previous owner did the same. If you're referring to Norma, she was 2 owners ago. This is off the Reddit thread. Could you tell me how you know all this information? It is stated somewhere. I grew up in that town. I was in school with the youngest daughter, and I'm not sure what you would like to know. It is a fact as far as the parent family have lived there. That's about all. If you have a specific question, I'll answer if I know. The house is not haunted. 2 owners ago, the house was actually a home daycare centre. Nobody was afraid to leave their kids there. I have relatives who used the daycare. Nothing ever happened there. Years before that, when the parents lived there and the daughters who invited friends for sleepovers, they would never said that the house was haunted, and nothing ever happened. I'm not gonna lie, most of these are basically saying it's not haunted, which is actually quite shocking to me. But someone did put here, there is a lot of misinformation out there about the history of the house, included in this post and comment. I haven't read about them in a while, but they were pretty heavily criticised and doubted by people who did paranormal investigations, as well as people who are skeptics. Also, people who have done paranormal investigations have actually gone in there and it's like, yeah, nothing basically. Okay, interesting. Because obviously I've watched investigations about it and it's always claimed that it's haunted, but you gotta be careful with some investigators, especially like ones that are around nowadays, because there are a lot of fakes, and so there could be people that are just like claiming that it's haunted when really it's not. I'm actually surprised about how many people are saying that it's not as haunted as people claim to be, because I've never heard that before today. I don't know about you.
Yeah, same.
Okay, so that is the end of today's podcast. This was a lot shorter than what we thought, because we thought there was going to be a lot more information about it, but it turns out there isn't as much information as we thought about the Conjuring House, which is quite shocking. I must say, doing this podcast today, I've learned quite a lot myself. I felt like I knew a lot, but I didn't know as much as I thought I did, clearly. But that is the end of today's podcast. Thank you all so much for watching or listening. Remember to go and follow us on Spotify and rate us a 5-star, because we also do post our audio over there. Thank you all again, and we hope to see you all in our next
Episode.
That's it. Bye.
Bye.